Hello, my dear friends. You are standing at the edge of a cliff so high that the clouds drift below you like a river of mist. Your legs are trembling, not from fear, though fear is certainly present. They are trembling from exhaustion. You have been climbing for 6 hours. The path behind you is nothing more than a series of handholds carved into the rock face by your ancestors 300 years ago. One slip and you will fall for nearly a full minute before your body meets the valley floor, but you cannot stop now. Strapped to your back is a basket containing salt, medicine, and a single letter from the government office in the distant city. These supplies must reach the village above. 53 people are waiting for you. 53 people who have not seen a fresh face in over 4 months. The wind howls around you, trying to peel you from the stone. Your fingers are bleeding where the rough rock has torn away the skin. Your lungs are burning from the thin mountain air. And yet you climb, because this is the only way in or out of the village where you were born. There is no road. There is no helicopter landing pad. There is only this ancient ladder carved into a cliff that rises nearly 800 meters straight up. Welcome to Zhongdong, one of the most isolated villages on Earth. A place where survival itself is an act of defiance against geography. A place where 53 souls have chosen to live inside a massive cave halfway up a mountain in China's Guizhou province. We think we understand what it means for a village to be remote. We imagine dirt roads and limited internet access. We picture communities that are a long drive from the nearest hospital, but we have no concept of true isolation. We cannot fathom what it means to live in a place where the journey to buy groceries could kill you, where a broken leg might mean death simply because no rescue is possible, where children must climb vertical cliff faces just to attend school. And yet, throughout human history, people have chosen to live in exactly these kinds of places. They've built homes on cliff sides and in caves. They have established communities on tiny islands, surrounded by thousands of miles of open ocean. They have carved villages into mountainsides so steep that a single misstep means falling into the clouds. Why? Why would anyone choose such a life? The answers are as varied as the villages themselves. Sometimes it was safety. A cliff dwelling cannot be easily attacked by enemies. Sometimes it was resources. A remote valley might contain the only fertile soil for hundreds of miles. Sometimes it was faith. A sacred mountain must be inhabited by those who worship there. And sometimes the answer is simply that this is home. This is where our ancestors lived. This is where our children will be born. This is the only world we have ever known. Tonight, we are going to visit these impossible villages. We are going to climb their cliffs and cross their rope bridges. We are going to meet the people who wake up every morning in places that seem designed to kill them. We are going to understand how communities of 50 or 100 or 200 people have managed to survive for centuries in locations that would break most of us within a week. These are not adventure stories. These are not tales of extreme tourism or daredevil stunts. These are the quiet, daily realities of ordinary people living extraordinary lives. Farmers and teachers and blacksmiths and children. People who want the same things we all want. Food on the table, health for their families, a future for their children. The only difference is that achieving these simple goals requires courage that most of us will never have to summon. So, before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new height button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we will drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. Let us begin our journey in China, in that cave village I mentioned. Zhongdong, which means middle cave in Mandarin, is not a metaphor. It is a literal description. The village sits inside an enormous natural cavern carved into the side of a mountain. The cave mouth is over 100 meters wide and nearly 50 meters tall. From a distance, it looks like a giant has taken a bite out of the mountainside. Inside this mouth, protected from rain and wind and the worst of the weather, a small community has made its home. The houses are simple structures of wood and bamboo. They have no need for roofs, since the cave ceiling provides shelter from above. Chickens scratch at the cave floor, which has been packed smooth by generations of footsteps. Pigs root in small enclosures near the entrance where the light is better. And children play basketball on a court that was built by flattening a section of the cave and installing a single hoop. The sound of the bouncing ball echoes strangely in the cavern, mixing with the calls of birds that nest in the high crevices. This is life in Zhongdong. It is peaceful in its way, beautiful, even. But it is also unimaginably hard. For most of the village's history, there was no electricity. People worked by daylight and slept when darkness fell. Candles and oil lamps were precious resources, too valuable to waste on casual illumination. The cave is naturally cool in summer and relatively warm in winter, which sounds comfortable until you realize that relatively warm in a mountain cave still means temperatures that hover near freezing for months at a time. Water comes from a spring deeper in the cave system. Women and children make multiple trips each day, carrying heavy containers back to their homes. The spring has never run dry, which is why the village exists in this particular location. Water is life. In a landscape of limestone cliffs and deep gorges, a reliable water source is worth any amount of hardship. Food is the constant challenge. The cave floor cannot be farmed. The soil is thin and rocky, barely able to support the weeds that grow near the entrance. So the villagers must farm on the mountainside itself, on tiny terraced plots that cling to slopes so steep they would make most farmers weep. Every seed, every tool, every ounce of fertilizer must be carried up the cliff path. Every harvest must be carried back down. The terraces are so narrow that a single ox cannot turn around on them. All plowing is done by hand, using techniques that have not changed in centuries. Rice is the main crop, grown in paddies that are fed by a complex system of channels, directing water from mountain streams. The engineering required to create these paddies is remarkable. Generations of farmers have slowly carved the mountainside into a staircase of pools, each one carefully leveled so that water flows gently from terrace to terrace. From above, the mountains look like they are covered in green mirrors, reflecting the sky. This is the landscape that the villagers of Zhongdong call home. A vertical world where flat ground is a rare luxury. A place where the simple act of walking to your field requires the same skills most people only use when rock climbing. The children grow up fearless on the cliffs. By the age of 5 or 6, they are scrambling up rock faces that would terrify adult climbers. They know every handhold, every foothold, every loose stone to avoid. The mountain is their playground, their school, their entire universe. For most of them, the nearest town is a place they have heard about, but never seen. The journey is simply too dangerous and too exhausting to make casually. When the government built a school in a neighboring valley, the children of Zhongdong faced an impossible choice. They could walk for 3 hours each way, crossing the cliff path twice daily in all weather conditions. Or they could board at the school, returning home only for holidays. Most families chose boarding. The parents understood that education was their children's only chance at a different life. But it broke their hearts to send 6-year-olds away for months at a time. The village grew quieter as the children left. The basketball court saw less use. The cave, which had echoed with young voices for generations, became a place of adults and elders. This is the hidden cost of isolation, not just the physical hardship, but the slow bleeding away of the next generation. Young people leave for education and never come back. They discover that life is easier in the cities, that jobs pay better, that hospitals are closer. Why would they return to a cave on a cliff when they could live in an apartment with running water and electricity and internet? The population of Zhongdong peaked at over 100 people in the 1950s. Today it hovers around 50. Most of those who remain are old. The government has offered to relocate the villagers multiple times. They have built housing in the valley below, comfortable apartments with modern amenities. Some families have accepted and moved away. but others refuse. An old woman named Wang, who has lived in the cave for over 70 years, was asked why she would not leave. Her answer was simple: "The cave is my mother. How can I leave my mother?" This attachment to impossible places is something that outsiders struggle to understand. We see only the hardship. We see the bleeding fingers and the aching backs and the constant danger. We do not see the sunrise filling the cave mouth with gold every morning. We do not see the way the mist rises from the valley below like a blanket being slowly pulled away. We do not see the stars at night, undimmed by any artificial light, so bright and numerous that they seem close enough to touch. We do not feel the deep peace of a place where the modern world has never fully arrived, where the rhythms of life are still set by the sun and the seasons, where everyone knows everyone and no one locks their doors. The people of Zhongdong are not victims of geography. They are its partners. They have learned to work with the mountain rather than against it. They have developed skills and knowledge that cannot be taught in any school. And they have built a community that, despite its tiny size, has survived for centuries. But survival requires adaptation. And so, even in this most traditional of places, change has come. In 2003, a power line was finally extended to the cave. Electric lights flickered on for the first time. The children could now do homework after sunset. The adults could watch television, connecting for the first time to the world beyond the mountains. A few years later, a cell phone tower was built on a nearby peak. Suddenly, the villagers could call family members who had moved away. They could check weather forecasts before deciding when to plant. They could even, with a strong enough signal, access the internet. These technologies have not made life easy. The cliff path is still the cliff path. The terraces still require back-breaking labor. The isolation is still profound, but they have made survival slightly more possible. A medical emergency can now be reported by phone, even if the patient still has to be carried down the cliff for treatment. Young people who leave for school can stay in touch with their parents, making the separation slightly less painful. And the village itself has become something of a tourist attraction, bringing in small amounts of money that supplement the farming income. Visitors come to see the cave, to marvel at the cliff path, to take photographs of a way of life that seems impossibly remote from their own. The villagers welcome them with a mixture of pride and bemusement. They cannot quite understand why anyone would pay money to see ordinary people going about their ordinary lives. But they are happy to serve tea and answer questions and pose for pictures. The tourism money helps. Every little bit helps. This is the paradox of places like Zhongdong. Their isolation is both their curse and their appeal. The very difficulty that makes life hard also makes it fascinating to outsiders. The very remoteness that drives young people away also preserves traditions that have vanished everywhere else. Let us leave China now and travel to another impossible village. This one is not in a cave, but on a cliff face, so sheer that the houses seem to be glued to the rock. We are going to Spain, to a village called Setenil de las Bodegas. But first, we must understand the landscape that created it. The region of Andalusia in southern Spain is a land of dramatic contrasts. Sun-baked plains give way to sudden river gorges. Gentle olive groves end abruptly at the edges of limestone cliffs. And in the valleys where rivers have carved through soft rock, strange formations appear. Massive overhanging ledges, natural caves and hollows, walls of stone that lean out over the land below like frozen waves. It was in one of these places that the village of Setenil was born. The Trejo River has been carving its way through this valley for millions of years. It has created a gorge with walls that do not simply rise vertically, but actually curve outward as they climb. In some places, the overhang is so extreme that the sky is completely blocked. Standing on the street, you could stretch out your arms and touch the rock ceiling above you. The ancient inhabitants of this region saw opportunity where others might have seen danger. They began building their homes directly into the cliff face, using the overhanging rock as a natural roof. Why quarry stone and cut timber for a ceiling when the earth itself provides one? Why waste resources on construction when you can simply add walls to what nature has already created? The result is a village that seems to defy logic. Houses emerge from the rock like teeth growing from a jaw. Streets run through tunnels where the overhang meets the ground. Some buildings have 5 stories below ground and only 1 above, like icebergs with most of their mass hidden. From certain angles, it looks like the cliff is slowly swallowing the village. From others, it looks like the village is slowly escaping from the cliff. The effect is disorienting and beautiful. Visitors often stand in the streets, necks craned back, trying to make sense of what they are seeing. The rock above is not supported by anything. It simply hangs there, millions of tons of stone suspended overhead. One thinks of earthquakes, of erosion, of the slow grinding of geological time. How has this rock not fallen? How have these houses survived for centuries beneath a ceiling that could crush them in an instant? The answer lies in the particular nature of the stone. The limestone of this region is extremely hard and stable. It does not crumble easily. The river carved these overhangs over eons, wearing away the softer layers while leaving the harder cap rock intact. The result is a natural architecture that is remarkably strong. The overhangs have been in place for tens of thousands of years. They will likely remain for tens of thousands more, but the psychological effect of living beneath them is something else entirely. Newcomers to Setenil often report strange dreams in their first weeks. They dream of the rock above them, of its weight and presence. They dream of it slowly lowering inch by inch until they wake gasping. The villagers laugh at these stories. They have never known any other ceiling. To them, the rock above is as natural as the sky is to the rest of us. More natural, perhaps. The sky changes constantly. The rock is eternal. The advantages of this arrangement become clear when you consider the climate. Andalusia is one of the hottest regions in Europe. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 40 degrees Celsius. The sun is brutal, relentless, inescapable. Except in Setenil. In Setenil, the overhanging rock provides constant shade. The caves and hollows that serve as foundations for the buildings maintain cool temperatures year-round. While the rest of Spain bakes, the people of Setenil sit in their naturally air-conditioned homes, sipping cool drinks and feeling slightly superior. In winter, the arrangement is equally beneficial. The rock absorbs heat during the day and radiates it slowly at night. The cave spaces stay warmer than exposed buildings would. The village has a stable microclimate, protected from the extremes that afflict its neighbors. This is passive architecture at its finest. No electricity required, no complex engineering, just a deep understanding of how to work with the landscape rather than against it. The villagers of Setenil have been refining this understanding for at least 500 years. When the Moors ruled this part of Spain, they built a fortress on the cliff above the village. The fortress controlled the river crossing and the trade route that passed through the gorge. It was considered impregnable, protected by the same landscape that shelters the village below. When the Christian armies of Ferdinand and Isabella came to conquer Andalusia, Setenil held out longer than almost any other stronghold. The army laid siege 7 times before the village finally fell in 1484. 7 times they attacked, and 7 times the combination of steep cliffs and overhanging rock defeated them. This history of resistance is woven into the identity of Setenil. The villagers are proud people, stubborn people. They've been underestimated by outsiders for 5 centuries. They have learned that their strange landscape is not a weakness, but a strength. The fall of the fortress did not end Setenil's story. If anything, it began a new chapter. Under Christian rule, the village expanded. More homes were carved into the cliff. More caves were converted into wine cellars, which gave the village its full name. Bodegas means wine cellars in Spanish. Setenil de las Bodegas. Setenil of the wine cellars. The caves turned out to be perfect for aging wine. The constant temperature, the high humidity, the protection from light and vibration, all the conditions that modern wineries spend fortunes creating, Setenil had for free. The wines of Setenil became famous throughout Andalusia. Merchants traveled for days to fill their carts with barrels of the local vintage. The village prospered. Today, the wine cellars are mostly gone, converted to restaurants and bars that cater to tourists. But the spirit of adaptation remains. The people of Setenil have always been good at finding new uses for their impossible landscape. When tourism replaced agriculture as the main source of income, they embraced it. They opened hotels in the cliff dwellings. They converted ancient caves into shops selling local crafts. They learned to tell their story in languages they had never spoken before. The village that once resisted 7 sieges now welcomes thousands of visitors each year. It is a different kind of survival, but survival nonetheless. Walking through Setenil today is an experience unlike any other. You turn a corner and suddenly the street becomes a tunnel, the rock closing in above you. You enter a bar and realize that the back wall is not a wall at all, but the living cliff face, rough and ancient. You look up at a balcony and see potted flowers growing where they should not be able to grow, fed by water that seeps through cracks in the stone. The whole village feels like something from a fairy tale, a place that should not exist, that violates the rules of how humans are supposed to live. And yet here it is, home to about 3,000 people who go about their daily lives beneath millions of tons of rock. They shop at the grocery store that is half cave. They drink coffee at the cafe where the ceiling is raw limestone. They send their children to the school that is carved into the cliff face. This is their normal. This is just how life is. Let us travel now to an even more extreme example of human stubbornness. We are leaving Europe and heading to one of the most isolated places on Earth. A tiny island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. An island so remote that it makes everywhere else we have discussed seem practically suburban. This is Tristan da Cunha, the most remote inhabited island in the world. The nearest land is the equally tiny island of St. Helena, over 2,000 kilometers away. The nearest continent, Africa, is more than 2,700 kilometers distant. South America is over 3,000 kilometers in the other direction. The island sits in the middle of absolutely nothing. Cold water stretches in every direction to horizons that no ship will cross for months at a time. And yet, somehow, about 250 people call this place home. They have lived here for nearly 2 centuries. They have built a community that survives on fishing, farming, and an incredible amount of mutual support. They are perhaps the most isolated population of permanent residents anywhere on Earth. How did anyone end up in such a place? And why have they stayed? The answers involve shipwrecks, soldiers, volcanic eruptions, and a fierce independence that outsiders find almost incomprehensible. Let us begin at the beginning. The island was first spotted by Portuguese explorer Tristan da Cunha in 1506. He named it after himself, as explorers of that era tended to do. But he did not land. The seas around the island were too rough, the cliffs too steep, the risks too great. For the next 3 centuries, Tristan da Cunha remained uninhabited. Ships occasionally anchored offshore to take on fresh water or hunt the seals that basked on the rocky beaches. But no one stayed. The island seemed designed to reject human presence. It is essentially a volcano rising from the seafloor. The main peak, called Queen Mary's Peak, reaches over 2,000 meters above sea level. The slopes are steep and covered in dense vegetation. The only relatively flat land is a small plateau on the northwest coast, where the capital settlement now sits. This plateau is about 3 kilometers long and 1 kilometer wide at its widest point. This is the entire livable area of the island. 250 people in 3 square kilometers, surrounded by thousands of kilometers of empty ocean. The first permanent settler was an American named Jonathan Lambert. He arrived in 1810 with 2 companions, claiming the island as his own personal kingdom. He declared himself sovereign and invited other settlers to join him. The experiment did not last long. Lambert drowned in a fishing accident just 2 years later. His companions drifted away. The island was uninhabited once more. The real settlement began in 1816, when the British military established a garrison on Tristan da Cunha. This was not because the island had any strategic value in itself. It was because the British were afraid that someone might use it as a base to rescue Napoleon. Napoleon Bonaparte had been exiled to St. Helena after his final defeat at Waterloo. St. Helena was remote, but not remote enough for British paranoia. They feared that French loyalists might establish a staging post on Tristan da Cunha to plan a rescue mission, and so a small garrison was sent to prevent this from happening. The soldiers built a fort and settled in for what they assumed would be a short deployment. Napoleon died in 1821. The reason for the garrison's existence evaporated. The British government decided to withdraw the troops, but not everyone wanted to leave. Corporal William Glass had grown to love the island. He had married a woman from St. Helena and started a family. He saw opportunity in this isolation, a chance to build something free from the interference of distant governments. Glass asked permission to stay behind with his family. The request was granted. On November 20th, 1817, William Glass, his wife Maria, and their 2 children became the permanent population of Tristan da Cunha. Glass had a vision for his tiny community. He wanted to create a society based on equality and cooperation. There would be no classes, no hierarchy, no one person holding authority over another. All decisions would be made collectively. All resources would be shared. It was a utopian experiment on the edge of the world, and remarkably, it worked. Over the years, other settlers arrived, shipwrecked sailors who chose to stay rather than wait for rescue. Women imported from St. Helena to provide wives for the growing population of men. Adventurers and outcasts looking for a fresh start. The community grew slowly but steadily. By the mid-1800s, about 100 people called the island home. They farmed potatoes and kept cattle. They fished the rich waters around the island. They traded with passing ships for goods they could not produce themselves. Life was hard, but it was sustainable. The isolation that made life difficult also provided a strange kind of protection. Diseases that swept through continental populations often missed Tristan da Cunha entirely. The community was too small and too far away to be connected to the networks of contagion that killed millions elsewhere. When influenza devastated populations around the world, Tristan remained healthy. When wars consumed entire nations, the islanders knew only what they read in months-old newspapers. They lived in a bubble, separated from the tragedies of the wider world. But isolation is a double-edged sword. In 1885, a tragedy struck that nearly ended the settlement entirely. A small boat set out from the island to meet a passing ship. On board were 15 men, almost the entire adult male population. The sea that day was rough, but not unusually so. The men were experienced sailors who had made this trip hundreds of times. No one knows exactly what happened. Perhaps a sudden wave capsized the boat. Perhaps equipment failed. Perhaps the ship they were approaching created a dangerous wake. Whatever the cause, the boat went down. All 15 men were lost. In a single afternoon, the island lost most of its working age, males. Widows outnumbered wives. Children lost their fathers. The entire economic foundation of the community was shattered. The survivors faced an impossible choice. They could abandon the island and seek new lives elsewhere. The British government offered to evacuate anyone who wanted to leave. Or they could stay and rebuild from nothing. They chose to stay. The women took over the fishing boats. The children grew up faster than children should have to grow. And slowly, painfully, the community rebuilt itself. New settlers arrived. The population recovered. Within a generation, the disaster of 1885 had become another story told to children around the fire. This resilience defines the people of Tristan da Cunha. They have faced challenges that would have broken larger communities, and they have survived every time. In 1961, the volcano that forms the island's core came to life. Earthquakes shook the ground. Fissures opened near the settlement. Scientists who arrived to study the phenomenon warned that an eruption was imminent. The entire population, about 260 people at the time, was evacuated to England. They arrived in a country they had only heard about, facing a world completely unlike anything they had known. The adjustment was brutal. The islanders were accustomed to a life of physical labor and close community. They found themselves in crowded cities, surrounded by strangers who spoke too fast and lived too separately. Many of them became sick. their immune systems unprepared for diseases that continental populations had developed resistance to over generations. They were homesick in ways that most people cannot comprehend. Home was not just a place, but an entire way of being, and they had been torn from it without warning. The British government assumed that the evacuation would be permanent. Officials made plans to resettle the islanders, to absorb them into British society. New homes were found. Job training was offered. The message was clear. Your old life is over. Time to start a new one. But the islanders had other ideas. They petitioned to return. They argued that the volcano had quieted and that the danger had passed. They insisted that Tristan da Cunha was their home and that they had the right to live there regardless of the risks. The government was skeptical. Why would anyone choose to return to such an isolated, dangerous place when they could live in comfort in England? The islanders were patient but persistent. In 1963, the first group returned to Tristan da Cunha. They found their homes damaged but not destroyed. They found their livestock running wild but still alive. They found their island waiting for them. Within a few years, almost the entire original population had returned. Today, the settlement of Edinburgh of the Seven Seas is home to about 250 people. It remains the most remote permanent settlement on Earth. The nearest airport is on Ascension Island, over 2,400 kilometers away. There is no airport on Tristan. The terrain is too rough and the population too small to justify the expense. The only way to reach the island is by ship, and ships come infrequently. There is one regular supply vessel that makes the journey from South Africa about 8 or 9 times per year. The trip takes about 7 days in good weather. In bad weather, it takes longer. In very bad weather, it does not happen at all. The islanders have learned to plan their lives around this schedule. When the ship comes, it brings everything: mail, medical supplies, spare parts, new residents, news of the outside world. When the ship leaves, the island becomes an island again, cut off and self-reliant. Medical care is a particular challenge. There is a small hospital on the island with a resident doctor and nurse. They can handle routine illnesses and minor emergencies. But anything serious requires evacuation. Evacuation requires a ship. A ship requires weather. And weather in the South Atlantic is notoriously unpredictable. Someone having a heart attack on Tristan da Cunha faces a wait of days or weeks before they can receive proper treatment. Many conditions that would be easily treatable elsewhere become death sentences on the island. The islanders knew this. They accept it as part of the bargain they have made with isolation. The economy of Tristan is surprisingly robust for such a tiny community. The main industry is fishing, specifically for the spiny lobster that thrives in the cold waters around the island. These lobsters are exported to markets in the United States and Japan, where they command premium prices. The revenue from fishing is shared among the entire community. Everyone benefits, not just the fishermen. Stamps are another major source of income. Collectors around the world prize stamps from remote locations, and Tristan da Cunha is about as remote as it gets. The island issues regular series of commemorative stamps that sell for far more than their face value. It is a clever way to monetize isolation. Tourism exists but is limited by the difficulty of access. A handful of expedition cruise ships visit each year, anchoring offshore and bringing passengers to the settlement by small boat. The islanders welcome these visitors with genuine warmth. They give tours of the settlement, explain the history, sell local crafts. Then the tourists return to their ship and sail away, and life returns to normal. There is no hotel on Tristan. There is no restaurant in the conventional sense. There is one pub, called the Albatross Bar, which serves as the social center of the community. This is where islanders gather to watch television, play darts, celebrate birthdays and holidays. Television arrived on Tristan only recently. For most of the settlement's history, the only entertainment was what the community created for itself. Songs and stories, games and gossip. People talked to each other because there was nothing else to do. This has created a community where everyone knows everyone. Privacy in the mainland sense does not exist. Your business is everyone's business. Your problems are shared problems. Your joys are communal celebrations. Some people find this claustrophobic. The occasional newcomer arrives expecting island paradise and discovers instead that they cannot escape the gaze of their neighbors. They leave as soon as the next ship arrives, but for those who belong to Tristan, this closeness is not a burden. It is the whole point. They are not isolated individuals. They are a single organism, 250 people functioning as one. The genetic makeup of Tristan's population tells a fascinating story. Almost all current residents are descended from just 15 ancestors, the original settlers and the few who joined them in the early years. 8 family names account for the entire population. Everyone is related to everyone else. Marriage within such a small gene pool presents obvious challenges. The islanders are well aware of the dangers of inbreeding and have developed informal rules to ensure that marriages connect the least related individuals possible. Genetic studies have been conducted on the population, partly out of scientific curiosity and partly out of concern for hereditary conditions. Researchers have found some predictable patterns. Certain rare conditions that would be nearly non-existent in larger populations appear with higher frequency on Tristan. About half the population carries a gene for asthma, a rate far higher than the global average. A rare hereditary eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa affects multiple families, but the islanders have also shown remarkable genetic resilience. They have avoided many of the more serious problems that afflict isolated populations. This is partly luck and partly the result of careful mate selection over generations. The genetic future of the community depends on continued immigration. New blood is needed to prevent the gene pool from becoming dangerously narrow. But finding people willing to move to the most remote island on Earth is not easy. Occasionally, someone falls in love with an islander they met while the islander was traveling or studying abroad. These outsiders, called chimeras by the locals, face a steep adjustment, learning to live without privacy, learning to contribute to communal work, learning to accept that help is not just offered, but expected. Many do not make it, but those who do become Tristanians, as surely as anyone born on the island. Education on Tristan goes up to secondary level. The island school serves all children from the youngest to the oldest. Classes are small, often single digits. Teachers come from outside, typically on 2-year contracts, recruited from the United Kingdom. For them, the posting is either an adventure or a sentence, depending on temperament. Students who want higher education must leave. They go to England or South Africa, facing the same culture shock that their grandparents experienced during the 1961 evacuation. Some return after completing their studies. They bring back skills that the island needs: nursing, engineering, teaching, administration. Others do not return. They discover that the wider world offers opportunities that Tristan cannot match. They build lives elsewhere, visiting the island only occasionally, if at all. This is the constant tension of isolated communities. They need the skills and knowledge of the outside world, but acquiring those skills often means losing the people who have them. Every young person who leaves for education is a gamble. Will they come back? Will they bring their skills home? Or will they be absorbed into the billions who live normal lives in normal places? The answer is never certain, and so the community waits, hopes, and plans for both possibilities. Let us leave Tristan now and travel to yet another impossible place. This one is closer to the mainstream of human civilization, but no less remarkable for its survival. We are going to Nepal, to a region so high and so remote that even the birds struggle to fly there. We are going to the village of Laya in the far northwest corner of Bhutan's neighbor to the west. But our destination is not Laya itself. It is a village even more remote, even higher, even more impossible. We are going to Lunana. Lunana is not a single village but a region. It sits at an average elevation of over 4,000 meters, higher than most mountain peaks in Europe or North America. The air is thin. Visitors from lower altitudes often suffer altitude sickness, their bodies struggling to extract enough oxygen from the depleted atmosphere. The growing season is measured in weeks rather than months. Snow covers the ground for more than half the year. And yet, about 1,000 people live here, scattered across a handful of tiny settlements. They raise yaks and grow what little will grow at these heights. They have created a culture perfectly adapted to their extreme environment. They are among the most isolated communities on Earth. Getting to Lunana requires a journey that would deter most travelers. First, you fly to Paro, the only international airport in Bhutan. Then you drive for hours on winding mountain roads to the end of the road system. Then you walk. The trek from the nearest roadhead to Lunana takes about 8 days. 8 days of hiking through some of the most spectacular and dangerous terrain on the planet. The trails cross high passes where snow can fall in any month. They traverse glacial moraines where a single misstep means a fall into crevasses. They climb to heights where the lack of oxygen turns every step into a struggle. And at the end, you arrive in a landscape that seems barely capable of supporting human life. The villages of Lunana are built from stone and mud. The roofs are flat, designed to hold the snow rather than shed it. The walls are thick, insulated against cold that would kill an unprepared person in hours. Prayer flags flutter from every rooftop, their colors faded by the harsh sun at altitude. The people of Lunana are Buddhists, their faith woven into every aspect of daily life. Monasteries perch on mountainsides, maintained by monks who have chosen the hardest possible path to enlightenment. Religious festivals mark the passing of the year, bringing together families from across the region for days of ceremony and celebration. This faith is not separate from survival, it is part of survival. The rituals and prayers are believed to protect the community from avalanches, from blizzards, from the countless dangers that threaten life at this altitude. Whether or not you believe in their spiritual efficacy, they serve a practical purpose. They bind the community together. They give meaning to suffering. They provide a framework for understanding a world that could otherwise seem purely hostile. The yak is the center of Lunana's economy. These shaggy, powerful animals are perfectly adapted to high-altitude life. They can graze on vegetation that no other domestic animal would touch. They provide milk, meat, wool, and labor. Their dung is dried and burned for fuel, the only source of heat in a land above the tree line. Without yaks, human life in Lunana would be impossible. The relationship between the people and their animals is intimate and complex. Herders know each yak individually, can read their moods and anticipate their needs. The welfare of the herd is the welfare of the community. When disease strikes the yaks, the humans suffer. When the yaks thrive, the humans prosper. The people of Lunana practice a form of transhumance, moving their herds between high and low pastures according to the seasons. In summer, when the snow melts and grass grows on the highest slopes, the yaks are driven up to alpine meadows. The herders follow them, living in temporary camps, sleeping in tents or simple stone shelters. In winter, when the high pastures become impassable, everyone descends to the relatively lower valleys. Relatively lower still means over 3,000 meters, still higher than most humans live anywhere else on Earth. This constant movement is exhausting but necessary. The thin soil of Lunana cannot support permanent grazing. If the yaks stayed in one place, they would strip the land bare within a few seasons. The rotation allows the pastures to recover, ensuring that there will be grass next year and the year after. It is a system developed over centuries, refined by countless generations of herders. It works, but it requires knowledge that cannot be easily taught or written down. You must know which slopes catch the sun and which remain in shadow. You must know where the grass grows thickest and where it is too sparse to bother. You must know the signs of weather, the behavior of animals, the 1,000 small signals that tell you when to move and where to go. This knowledge is passed from parent to child, absorbed through years of participation. A herder from Lunana could not explain everything they know any more than you could explain everything you know about your own neighborhood. It is simply part of who they are. Climate change threatens this entire way of life. The glaciers that feed the rivers of Lunana are retreating. The snow patterns that herders have relied on for generations are becoming unpredictable. Pastures that once supported hundreds of yaks are drying out. Floods from glacial lake outbursts have destroyed villages and killed people. The people of Lunana are among the least responsible for climate change and among the most affected by it. They produce essentially no carbon emissions. They live lives of extreme simplicity by global standards, and yet they are watching their world transform in ways they do not understand and cannot control. Some have begun to leave. The Bhutanese government has established relocation programs, offering land and support to families willing to move to lower altitudes. Some young people have taken the offer, building new lives in places where survival is not a daily struggle. But others refuse. They cite the same reasons we have heard before. This is our home. These are our ancestors' lands. Our gods live on these mountains. How can we leave? The Bhutanese government, to its credit, has not forced the issue. Unlike many countries that have relocated indigenous populations without consent, Bhutan has allowed the people of Lunana to make their own choices. Those who want to stay may stay. Those who want to leave receive support. It is a model of how governments might handle the climate displacements that are coming for communities around the world. But it does not solve the fundamental problem. The glaciers are still melting. The weather is still changing. The future of Lunana remains uncertain. What we do know is that for now, the villages persist. Prayer flags still flutter. Yaks still graze. Children still learn the skills of their parents. And life continues at the roof of the world. Let us descend now from these heights. We have one more village to visit before our journey ends. This one is not in the mountains or on a remote island. It is in a place that seems at first glance perfectly normal. We are going to Italy, to the southern region of Calabria. This is not an isolated wilderness. It is a landscape of rolling hills, olive groves, and ancient towns. Roads connect every settlement. Services are available. The modern world is fully present. And yet, in this accessible landscape, there are villages that are dying. Not from natural disaster or extreme geography. They're dying from something more insidious. They are dying from neglect, from demographic collapse, from the slow bleeding away of population that afflicts rural communities across the developed world. The village of Savita has about 800 residents. A century ago, it had over 2,000. The village of Katkiri has about 1,500. A century ago, it had nearly 3,000. Across Calabria, across southern Italy, across rural Europe, the pattern repeats. Young people leave for the cities. They seek education, employment, excitement, the things that small villages cannot provide. The old people remain. They tend their gardens and wait for visits from children who live in Milan or Rome or London. They watch their neighbors die, one by one, until the streets fall silent. Eventually, even the old people are gone, and the village joins the ranks of ghost towns that dot the Italian countryside. Thousands of villages have already been abandoned. Thousands more are on the brink. The houses stand empty. The churches lock their doors. The cafes where old men once gathered to argue about politics and football serve no one. This is a different kind of impossible survival. Not survival against geography, but survival against economics and demographics. Not survival at the edge of the world, but survival at the edge of relevance. Some villages have found creative solutions. They have sold houses for €1 to foreigners willing to renovate them. They have invited refugees to settle, offering homes in exchange for new life in dying streets. They have reinvented themselves as tourist destinations, marketing their emptiness as authenticity. The results have been mixed. Some €1 house programs have attracted thousands of applications from people around the world dreaming of a cheap home in sunny Italy. But dreams and reality are different things. The houses often require tens of thousands of euros in renovations before they are habitable. The buyers must navigate Italian bureaucracy, language barriers, and cultural differences. Many give up before completing the process. Those who persist often find that living in a dying village is lonelier than they expected. The charm wears off. The isolation sets in. The cafe is still closed, the neighbors are still absent, and the dream house becomes a burden rather than a blessing. Other villages have had better luck with refugee resettlement. The town of Rias became internationally famous for its integration program. Refugees from Africa and the Middle East were welcomed into empty houses. They opened businesses, enrolled their children in schools that would otherwise have closed, brought life back to streets that had fallen silent. For a while, it seemed like a model solution, then politics intervened. The mayor was arrested on charges related to immigration. The program was shut down. Some refugees left. The future of Rashis remains uncertain. This is the challenge facing communities throughout the developed world. How do you convince people to stay in places that offer fewer opportunities than the cities? How do you attract newcomers to places that even the locals are abandoning? How do you build a future for communities whose best days seem to be behind them? There are no easy answers. Every village that survives does so through a combination of luck, leadership, and local assets that cannot be replicated elsewhere. A spectacular landscape that draws tourists. A unique product that commands premium prices. A charismatic mayor who convinces young people to stay. A wealthy benefactor who funds restoration projects. These factors cannot be manufactured. They cannot be scaled. What works in one village may fail completely in another, and yet, against all odds, some villages do survive. They find their niche, their reason to exist, their path forward through impossible circumstances. Consider the village of Alberobello in Puglia, another region of southern Italy. Alberobello has something no other place has, truly. Truly are unique cone-shaped buildings constructed from dry stone without mortar. They date back centuries, their origins lost in legend. One story says that the local lord ordered buildings made without mortar so they could be quickly disassembled if tax collectors came to assess property. Whether or not this is true, the truly survived. Today, about 1,500 of them cluster in the old town of Alberobello. UNESCO declared them a World Heritage Site in 1996. Tourists come from around the world to see these strange, beautiful buildings. The village that might have died has instead thrived. Hotels and restaurants fill the truly. Shops sell souvenirs and local products. Young people stay because there are jobs in tourism. Families return because there is a future here. The truly saved Alberobello. But most villages do not have truly. They have ordinary houses and ordinary churches and ordinary streets. They have nothing that makes them special, except the people who live there. And when those people leave, there is nothing to draw anyone else. This is the hardest truth about rural decline. It is not fair. Some places have advantages that others do not. Some places will survive and others will not. And there is often very little that anyone can do to change the outcome. But unfair does not mean unimportant. The villages that are dying carry centuries of history, culture, and knowledge. They are repositories of traditions that exist nowhere else, recipes that have been passed down for generations, crafts that require skills learned over lifetimes, dialects and songs and stories that would disappear when the last speakers die. When a village dies, something irreplaceable is lost, something that can never be recovered, something that once existed and now does not. This is why the survival of small communities matters, even to those of us who will never live in them. They are part of our collective human heritage. They are proof that people can make homes anywhere, under any circumstances. They are reminders that human beings are stubborn, adaptable, endlessly creative. And when they disappear, we all lose something, even if we do not know what we have lost. The night is deep now. We have traveled far, you and I. We have climbed cliff faces and crossed oceans. We have stood in caves and on glacier moraines. We have met people who live in places that should be uninhabitable. What have we learned? Perhaps we have learned that survival is not just a matter of resources and technology. It is a matter of will. The will to stay when leaving would be easier. The will to adapt when conditions change. The will to find meaning in hardship. The will to pass something on to the next generation. The people of Zhongdong could have moved to the valley below. The people of Tristan da Cunha could have stayed in England. The people of Lunana could have descended to the lowlands. The people of dying Italian villages could have accepted that their time has passed. But they did not. They chose to stay. They chose to fight. They chose to insist that their homes matter, that their communities matter, that their way of life matters. This stubbornness can seem foolish to outsiders. Why cling to a place that makes life so hard? Why not accept the inevitable and move on? But the question misses something essential. Home is not just a location, it is an identity. It is a connection to ancestors and descendants. It is a way of understanding who you are and where you belong in the world. To leave home is not just to change addresses, it is to become someone else, and that is a transformation that not everyone is willing to undergo. There is wisdom in this stubbornness. The modern world constantly tells us to be mobile, flexible, ready to move wherever opportunity calls. We are supposed to have careers, not jobs. We are supposed to follow the market, not our hearts. We are supposed to treat place as incidental, a mere backdrop to our real lives. But the people of impossible villages know something different. They know that place shapes us in ways we cannot fully understand, that the landscape we grow up in becomes part of our minds and bodies. That leaving is not just a physical act, but a kind of death and rebirth. Some of them have chosen not to die. They have chosen to live in the only way they know how, in the places where they belong. This is not a choice for everyone. Some people thrive on mobility. Some people need the stimulation of cities and the variety of constant change. There is nothing wrong with that, but there is also nothing wrong with staying, with putting down roots so deep that nothing can tear them up, with insisting that this place, this community, this way of life is worth preserving. The world needs both kinds of people, the movers and the stayers, the seekers and the keepers, the adventurers and the guardians. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, consider which you are, or perhaps you are both, at different times and in different ways. Perhaps we all are. The first grey light is touching the horizon, another night passes into memory. The villages we have visited continue their existence, unaware of our attention. In Zhongdong, someone is already climbing the cliff path, supplies strapped to their back. On Tristan da Cunha, fishermen are preparing their boats for another day on the cold Atlantic. In Lunana, yaks are stirring in their pens, breath steaming in the thin mountain air. In Calabria, an old woman is opening her shutters, looking out at a street that grows emptier each year. These lives continue, these struggles persist, these impossible survivals go on, day after day, generation after generation. They do not ask for our admiration, they do not seek our pity, they simply exist as they have always existed, doing what is necessary to survive. And in their survival, they teach us something. They teach us that humans can adapt to almost anything, that we are far more resilient than we give ourselves credit for, that the limits we imagine are often not limits at all. If people can make homes in caves and on cliffs, on remote islands and at the roof of the world, then perhaps our own challenges are not so insurmountable. Perhaps the difficulties we face are not reasons to give up, but opportunities to discover what we are capable of. Perhaps we are all living in impossible villages of one kind or another, struggling against circumstances that seem designed to defeat us, finding ways to persist despite everything, building communities that sustain us, creating meaning in landscapes that others might find empty. Sleep now, my friends. Let the darkness wrap around you like a blanket. Let the stories we have shared settle into your dreams. Tomorrow, you will wake and face your own impossible terrain. You will climb your own cliff paths. You will cross your own empty oceans. And you will do it because that is what humans do. We survive. We adapt. We persist against all odds. In every corner of the world, in every era of history, we find a way. Morning is coming. Rest now. The journey continues when you wake.